We lived in a small neighborhood, and all of the surrounding streets dead end into a half-circle park. Behind the park are some woods and a railroad track. When we were younger, we all played in the front part of the woods but never ventured too far back. This was our play area for years, and we never had any issues or scares. Anyhow, one day my brother Jimmy, my best friend Sarah, and my brother's best friend Ian were all building a dam in the middle of the small creek that ran through the park and the woods. The boys decided they were going to head back to Ian's house for some snacks, and Sarah and I said we would stay and finish our camp area. As we were moving rocks around, I got a very odd feeling that we were being watched. I immediately thought it was the boys trying to scare us, and continued with what we were doing. Sarah and I loaded up some big rocks and headed back to the creek to put them down at the dam. But that strange feeling returned, and as I stood up, I saw something straight in front of me about 30 feet away. I couldn't clearly make out what it was yet because it was behind a bush, but I did see that it was a pattern of red and blue. I knew that it was nothing the boys had on, so at that point I focused on trying to figure out what it was. As I scanned up the bush, I started to realize it was a clown. My heart started pounding immediately. The clown and my eyes locked. He was wearing a blue and red hat with a reverse pattern red and blue jumpsuit. I grabbed Sarah's shirt and immediately pulled her upright, and she noticed the man right away. He was smiling with a full face of makeup and had a huge knife. We both said nothing and started running as fast as our legs could take us. He began to follow us, and we could hear twigs snapping and the ground crunching, but we kept running. We ran through the front of the woods, through the side of the park, and up Sarah's dead-end street. Ian and Jimmy were 2 houses up from the end and saw us running, asking what was going on. As we ran past them, we screamed that there was a clown, and they started laughing. We kept running and screaming for our lives until we finally made it to the middle of the street, where Sarah's dad Danny was now running out the front door because he heard us screaming. We met Danny right at the beginning of the neighbor's house, trying to explain what we saw, but he said, "Girls, stop it now. This is ridiculous. What are you talking about?" We tried to catch our breath. By this time, Jimmy and Ian caught up to us. We were crying, pointing, and telling Danny again that we saw a clown and a knife. Jimmy and Ian were laughing, and Danny asked if they played a prank on us. About this time, an old yellow Pinto-type car came from the dead end at the park and pulled right up next to the sidewalk of the yard we were in. Sure enough, plain as day, it was the clown. He had no hat this time, but he had the knife in hand and was telling us to come to him. Danny started shoving us all toward the house, and he himself was scared and running now. The car drove off down the street. We got inside, and Danny called the police. We had to give statements, and the police patrolled the neighborhood and the park for a few weeks. We were never allowed to go in the park again, and a few months after that, the city started to clear out the woods, cutting down many trees and making a walking area that you could see through all the way to the train tracks. My friend and I used to talk about this many times up until her death. No one would believe us if they had not seen it as well. It was just so scary. I think they only got to see him because whoever it was had to go down the dead-end street to leave the neighborhood. Either way, this man was not afraid of us, nor the small group of people that gathered from our screaming. He very bravely stopped right in front of us as her father tried to comfort us and calm us down, all while flashing his knife. I feel lucky to be alive. Had it just been one of us left in the woods, which sometimes occurred, I don't think there would have been a group of 4 of us any longer. Sarah's dad stopped drinking that day, and we all have a fear of clowns now. When I was about 11, I went to a haunted trail with some friends of mine from karate. This place was your standard higher-end haunted trail. You know the kind, with a heated ticket booth, concession stand, and a fire pit where the performers could take their breaks, as well as people who were cold standing in line. The guy introducing us to the trail told us up front that the actors in the trail wouldn't touch us and would be fired if they were caught doing so. So we enter the first part of the trail. It's the kind where there's themed structures and areas with a few winding paths through the woods leading between them. The paths were lit with red Christmas lights and had chains laying out the path, so there weren't really employers on the trails, just the themed zones at the beginnings and ends of the trails. The longest trail through the woods was the one that led from the clown section to the part that had a bunch of people with chainsaws toward the end. Something that's important to know about this place is that it was very professional looking. All the costumes and props could have been props in AHS or Saw or something. The clowns all wore old-timey looking costumes that were authentic looking and professionally aged. Plus, they all wore makeup, not masks. A few dozen yards after leaving the clown house, a clown wearing a shitty polyester costume and rubber mask that couldn't have cost more than $20 walked out of the woods toward the trail. The fake bloodstains on his costume looked like ketchup, not the dark red stuff that stained the other clown costumes. I had really long platinum blonde hair at the time, so this dude stumbles up to me and yoinks my hair and holds it up. He pulls a very real kitchen knife, not painted to look rusty or anything, just a standard knife with a dark handle, and gets his mask close to me. I could smell whiskey and cigarettes through the mask. He tells me in a thick southern accent, "You got you some pretty ass hair. I think I'll take me some." He set the hand with the knife on my shoulder, and at this point I stop having a silent emotional breakdown and tear away from the guy. I stomped on his foot and ran away. This made him drop the knife, which made a light metallic noise when it hit the ground. I heard him yell, "Fucking cunt," while I was running and watched him slink back into the woods from a safe distance. Never heard anything more from him. When I was little, I just assumed he was a worker that didn't quite understand the rules. But as I got older, I realized two things. One, his shitty costume and real knife wouldn't be allowed in this haunted house. Two, with a better understanding of the area around the haunted trail, I realized that there was this trailer park known for drunk redneck antics and meth dealers in the direction he came from and returned to. I really don't think that he was supposed to be there. Back when I was 10 years old, my family decided to visit my hometown in Ecuador for the summer, and we planned out our entire stay. One day, my mom and dad were getting ready to attend a wedding, and I was at home with them. My big sister went over to a friend's house, and my other relatives had already left for the wedding. I was supposed to stay at home alone for the duration, but I saw that it was a beautiful day out and decided to ask my mom and dad to go to a park that was no more than 2 blocks away. They were reluctant at first, stating that there would be nobody to take care of me, but I argued that it was a beautiful day out, and there was no way that the park would be empty. They kept getting dressed as I continued to argue until they finally gave in. They said that I could go to the park as long as I was back before dark. I agreed and ran outside to head for the park. It took me no more than 10 minutes to get there, and I was ready to make new friends and play around. However, oddly enough, there was nobody else in the park. It looked abandoned, which was weird since it was one of only 2 parks in the whole city. It should have been packed, but I paid no mind to it. I believe I ran over to a swing set, or slide, it was 12 years ago, I can't remember, and played around. As I played, I suddenly heard a voice from the distance. A clown was on the other side of a gate, motioning for me to get closer. Behind him was a white van which I had noticed before but just thought it was a delivery truck of sorts. I slowly started walking towards the clown and stopped a good distance away from him. He asked me, in Spanish, "Hey kid, do you like clowns?" I nodded no to him, and he gave me that clown frown and then said, "Well then, let me see if I can change that." He opened up his car, and by looking inside, I saw there were only 2 boxes, though I wasn't sure what they were filled with, and that was it. No seats, no posters, just those 2 boxes, and then complete emptiness. Being a child, I still paid no mind to it, and watched as he pulled out a deflated balloon. He wrapped his lips around the end, and blew until the balloon was fully inflated. He tied the end and started to form the balloon into a balloon animal of a dog. He showed it to me, and I smiled. He then motioned for me to come closer, to which I complied. He handed the balloon to me and said, "Do you like it?" I nodded yes this time and gave him a little smile. He then grinned in the creepiest way possible. The grin was so creepy that even as a kid, I knew to back away a bit. The clown then said that if I wanted to see the rest of his tricks, I would have to get into the truck. I told him that the exit was on the other side of the park, and I wouldn't be able to climb the small gate. He then said the few words that haunt me to this day. "Get a little closer and I'll carry you over. Then we can have loads of fun in my truck, come on, kid." While saying this, he still had that creepy grin plastered across his face. I merely backed away and told him, "No, it's okay, sir." His grin turned into anger as though he was annoyed at this. He placed his hands on his hips and said to me, "Aw, but we were going to have so much fun." Right when he said that, I heard a voice on the other side of the park yelling, "Son, son, I'm here to pick you up." I turned and saw a man that I recognized as a local neighbor. He was not my real father, obviously, but the little me knew to run over to him. I said nothing to the clown. I just ran to the man and gave him a hug. The man waved to the clown and said, "Thanks for keeping my kid entertained," to which the clown replied, "No problem." As we turned around, I was able to hear this man murmur, "Sick fuck." I looked at him and asked, "Sir, what exactly is going on?" He gave a sigh and explained everything. As it turns out, that was no real clown. He was a man who had been kidnapping kids across all of Ecuador. He would lure kids with the clown costume and take them away to God knows what place. The people of my town had a feeling he was coming to our town, which was why the whole park was deserted. The man had noticed me talking to the clown and ran over to basically save me. As he told me this, he also dialed the police to report the incident. We finally arrived at my house, and this man said, "Be careful with whom you talk to, son. Not everyone is who they seem." I gave him one final hug and thanked him for saving me from that sick fuck. He gave me a rub on the head and said, "It's okay, my boy, now hurry on in. I have my own things to worry about." I nodded and ran into the house. Nobody was there, and by the time they had returned, I had decided not to tell anyone since I knew they'd flip out. It took a while to forget about the whole incident, especially with those words that kept reminding me of him. I'm not quite sure what happened to the sicko, but hopefully, he is behind bars now.